Have you ever seen someone like get a little too much satisfaction
Oh, yeah.
when someone else is having a hard time?
Oh, yeah.
It's
Schadenfreude.
it's kind of uncomfortable feeling, isn't it?
It is. And it's one of the big themes in the Book of Obadiah.
Oh, okay.
Which we are diving into today.
Okay, so we're dealing with Obadiah, single chapter prophecy.
That's right.
What's the background on it?
Yeah. So Obadiah focuses on the relationship between two nations, Edom and Israel.
Okay.
And they were descendants of Jacob and Esau.
Oh, wow.
And
Twin brothers.
twin brothers whose rivalry is like super famous in the Bible.
Yeah.
And that tension carried through generations.
Oh, wow.
With Edom known for hostility towards Israel.
So this is more than just like a political conflict.
Yeah.
Between nations. This is rooted in this deeper, almost familial
Absolutely.
struggle.
Yeah.
Does that make the message of Obadiah especially poignant?
Oh, yeah. It adds another layer to it.
Okay.
Because Obadiah calls out Edom for specific actions against Israel.
Right. But the underlying message about pride gloating and how we treat those we see as rivals, that has a timeless quality.
Let's get into those specifics then.
Okay.
What exactly did Edom do to draw such strong condemnation in Obadiah?
So Obadiah doesn't hold back.
Okay.
He describes how Edom took advantage of Israel when they were very vulnerable,
Okay.
siding with their enemies during an attack,
Oh, wow.
and even joining in the plundering of Jerusalem.
That sounds pretty harsh.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to have a rivalry, but to actively participate in someone's suffering, that's another level.
Absolutely.
What was it about Edom's behavior that was so egregious?
I think the book highlights a few key things. First, their pride.
Okay.
Obadiah describes them as dwelling in the clefts of the rock,
Yeah, okay.
feeling very secure and untouchable.
Right.
They had an arrogance that blinded them to the consequences of their actions.
That image of dwelling in the rocks almost makes them sound isolated,
Yes.
cut off from others.
Do you think their physical location contributed to their spiritual state?
I think that's a really interesting connection.
Yeah.
You know, the text uses that physical description to illustrate a spiritual state.
Right.
You know, that sense of self-reliance and looking down on others.
Right.
They're literally and figuratively putting themselves above everyone else.
And that brings us back to the idea of schadenfreude, right?
Exactly.
It's not just that they didn't help Israel. They seemingly took pleasure in their downfall.
That's right. Verse 11 describes them casting lots upon Jerusalem, essentially gambling for the spoils of war.
Wow.
It's a chilling detail that shows how detached they were from the suffering they were inflicting.
That's a powerful image that sticks with you.
Yeah.
It's almost as if they dehumanize Israel to justify their actions.
Yeah, that lack of empathy is a key part of Obadiah's message.
Okay.
The book really challenges us to consider how we respond when those we see as different or even rivals are struggling.
It makes you wonder where those feelings of animosity and judgment come from. Is it rooted in fear, insecurity, a need to feel superior?
That's a great question, and one that each of us needs to consider in our own lives.
Yeah.
You know, where do our judgments of others come from?
Right.
And how do those judgments impact our actions?
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in those negative cycles.
Right.
Especially when it comes to these long-standing rivalries or conflicts.
Yeah.
But Obadiah reminds us that no one is exempt from accountability.
Right.
No matter how justified we think our actions might be.
So what are the consequences that Obadiah outlines for this kind of behavior?
Right.
Is it just about punishment, or is there a deeper lesson here?
Well, the book prophesies a pretty dramatic downfall for Edom.
Okay.
They will experience the same suffering they inflicted on Israel.
Okay.
There's a strong sense of what goes around comes around, a kind of cosmic justice.
That idea of reaping what you sow feels very present in the text.
Yeah.
It's a powerful deterrent to acting out of malice or spite. Yeah. Verse 15 is very direct. As you have done, it shall be done to you. Your deeds shall return upon your own head.
Wow.
It emphasizes that our actions have consequences not just for others,
Right.
but for ourselves as well.
It makes you think twice about how you treat people,
Yeah.
even those you might consider rivals or competitors.
Absolutely.
There's a sense that we're all connected in some way.
That's a key takeaway from Obadiah.
Okay.
It challenges us to move beyond that narrow view of us versus them
Right.
and recognize the shared humanity that binds us together.
But even with that message of accountability, is there any room for hope in Obadiah?
That's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
While Obadiah focuses on Edom's downfall, there's also this promise of restoration for Israel.
Okay.
Verse 17 speaks of deliverance and holiness on Mount Zion,
Okay.
suggesting that even in the face of suffering, there's a possibility for renewal.
So it's not just about punishment, but also about the possibility of redemption.
Right.
And a return to a better state.
Exactly. And that hope isn't just for Israel in the ancient context.
Right.
It points to a universal truth that even when things seem dark, there's always potential for transformation and healing.
That's a message that resonates across time.
Yeah.
It suggests that we're not defined by our worst moments, that there's always a chance to make amends and move toward a more positive future.
And that connects to the idea of repentance,
Okay.
which is a central theme in the Bible.
Yeah.
It's not about being perfect, but about recognizing our mistakes,
Right.
turning away from harmful behavior, and striving to do better.
So even though Obadiah starts with a pretty strong condemnation of Edom's actions,
Right.
it ultimately offers a path toward reconciliation and a better way of being.
It's an invitation to reflect on our own behavior,
Okay.
to consider where we might be harboring resentment,
Right.
jealousy, or a sense of superiority,
Yeah.
and to choose a different path.
It seems like Obadiah is suggesting that true strength lies not in dominance or revenge, but in compassion, forgiveness, and a willingness to break free from those cycles of negativity.
That's a powerful message, and one that's especially relevant in our world today.
Right.
We're constantly bombarded with messages that encourage division, competition, and even hatred.
It can be challenging to resist those influences,
Yeah,
but Obadiah reminds us that there's another way, a way
absolutely.
that leads to greater peace, understanding, and connection.
And ultimately, that's what we all long for, isn't it? To live in a world where we see each other's humanity and treat each other with kindness and respect, even when we disagree.
That sense of shared humanity is such a powerful antidote
Mm-hmm.
to the negativity and division we see all around us.
Yeah,
It's a reminder that we're all in this together,
absolutely.
and that our actions have a ripple effect that extends far beyond ourselves.
So the question becomes, how do we translate those lofty ideals into our everyday lives?
Right.
How do we move beyond the theoretical and actually live in a way that reflects the wisdom of Obadiah?
That's the challenge, isn't it?
It is.
To bridge that gap between knowing what's right and actually doing it.
Yeah.
It's a lifelong process.
Yeah,
But I think Obadiah offers some valuable insights that can guide us along the way.
absolutely. It encourages us to examine our motivations, to challenge our assumptions, and to be willing to let go of those grudges and resentments that keep us stuck in the past.
It's about choosing a different path,
Mm-hmm.
a path that leads to greater understanding, compassion, and ultimately a more fulfilling and meaningful life,
Mm-hmm.
not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us.
Feels like we've covered a lot of ground here
We have.
in this deep dive.
Yeah.
We've gone from this ancient rivalry between Edom and Israel to reflecting on our own tendencies toward judgment and how we treat others.
It's fascinating how these ancient texts can act as a mirror, reflecting back to us those parts of ourselves that we might not always want to see.
Like Obadiah is holding up a sign that says, hey, look at this. This is what happens when pride, resentment, and lack of compassion take over. And it also offers a glimpse of what's possible when we choose a different path. A path guided by humility, empathy, and a desire for reconciliation.
But how do we actually put that into practice?
Right.
It's one thing to talk about these concepts,
Yeah.
but actually living them out in our daily lives can be tough.
It is, and it's a journey, not a destination.
Right.
There's no magic formula or one-size-fits-all solution. But I think Obadiah offers some valuable starting points.
Like what are some concrete things listeners can take away from this deep dive and apply to their own lives?
First, cultivate self-awareness.
Okay.
Pay attention to those moments when you feel that twinge of schadenfreude,
Right.
that sense of satisfaction when someone else stumbles. Ask yourself where those feelings come from. What insecurities or fears might be fueling them.
That's so important. It's about being honest with ourselves about our own motivations and recognizing that we all have blind spots.
Second, practice empathy.
Okay.
Try to see the world from the perspective of those you might disagree with or even dislike. What experiences have shaped their views? What struggles might they be facing that you're not aware of?
That can be challenging, especially in a world that often encourages us to view others as the other.
Right.
But it's essential if we want to break down those barriers and build bridges of understanding.
And finally, focus on building connections, even small ones.
Okay.
Reach out to someone you wouldn't normally connect with. Listen to their story. Look for common ground.
It's about recognizing that shared humanity we talked about earlier, that sense that we're all in this together despite our differences.
Exactly. And those small acts of connection can have a ripple effect, creating a more compassionate and understanding world, one interaction at a time.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Obadiah, I want to leave our listeners with this final thought. We all have the potential to be like Edom, to give in to pride, resentment, and judgment, but we also have the capacity for so much more.
We can choose to embody those qualities of humility, empathy, and forgiveness that Obadiah points us toward. It's not always easy, but it's a journey worth taking.
And who knows, maybe by embracing those values, we can help create a world that's a little less like the world of Obadiah and a little more like the world we all hope for, a world where understanding triumphs over division and compassion becomes the norm.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful and thought-provoking. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep striving to be the best version of yourself.